welcome to Choosing Acceptance podcast with your host, Marie Mason. I am here to share some success stories and tips on how to overcome your learning disability so that you can turn your talents into a career. And I love to inspire children and parents and teachers with learning disabilities to go beyond their limits so that they can make a bigger impact in the world. Schedule a call to become a guest on our show at calendly.com/Marie V. Mason. And welcome back, everybody, to Choosing Acceptance podcast with your host, Marie Mason. And we have a great show lined up for you, and you don't want to miss it. We will be sharing some great tips on how to overcome your learning disabilities and turn your talents into a career. At the end of each episode, stick around. We will share how to get access to some great resources and how you can understand and improve your learning disabilities. So before we bring up our speaker today, who is Georgia Varjas from Spain, say hi. So glad that you're here. I am going to be sharing some top tips of the week, and then we'll go to a quick commercial break and bring up our lovely and talented guest, Georgia Varjas, who I'm so happy that she's here today. So last week on the top tips of the week, we talked about the 3 tips on overcoming ADHD, and our speaker talked about the simple solutions to overcome ADHD without medication. I think it's really important that we don't over-medicate our children because there's also those things called side effects, and sometimes that medication works for a period of time and sometimes it doesn't. So it's really, really important that we find healthier, non-invasive ways to handle situations like learning disabilities and how we can overcome them in the more natural ways. Today's top tips, we are going to actually talk about the 3 common signs of auditory perception, which is actually my learning disability. And I want more people to understand about this learning disability, because it's not just because it's personal to me, because it's very misunderstood. So then I will bring up Georgia, our speaker, who will be talking about the 3 elements to our story, which is authority, tenacity, and credibility. And that's going to be an amazing topic because we want you to share your stories to the world. So with that, let's jump in. Now, what are the 3 common signs of auditory perception? Auditory perception is an essential part of the way in which we interact with our environment and how we understand the world around us. It involves the recognitions of sound and its properties, such as pitch and loudness. So there are 3 common signs of auditory perception that are most important to recognize. The first sign of auditory perception is the ability to detect differences in sound. This requires the ability to differentiate between tone and timbres and melodies. Do not ask me to explain timbres. That's a new terminology for me. Maybe, I don't know, maybe Georgia might have some ideas. Do you have any ideas what timbres means? I'm just curious.
Timbre is also is connected to tone.
Okay.
You know, is it a high pitch? Is it a low pitch? Which area does it cover? Mm-hmm.
Good point. I wasn't quite sure about that one. Like I said, it was a new terminology, and they've changed terminologies over the last several decades. So that's why I'm like, that's new to me. So thank you for that insight. And then, for instance, being able to tell the difference between a trumpet and a violin playing the same notes is an example of auditory perception. I always like to use this one. When I was in elementary school, I used to spell phonetically. So I would spell it like I heard it, which sometimes got me into trouble because it wasn't always how it was supposed to be spelled. So one of the things I used to spell wrong was the word of. Simple. 2 letters. It's an O and an F. but because I heard the sounds differently and I processed it differently in my brain, what I heard was OV. And so I spelled the word OV, which, after a while, my teacher picked up on it and realized, oh, yeah, she's spelling the word up. But anyway, but it took them a while to figure that out. So the second sign of auditory perception is a perception of direction. This includes being able to accurately identify the location of the sound source. Sometimes if it's in a noisy room, for example, I don't know about you, but I have a hard time picking up on sounds. And I'm sure even sometimes the average person does too. But when you have an auditory perception, it is really extremely hard sometimes to distinguish sounds if there's too much distraction. So as much as I enjoy being out publicly and in groups, I have to actually really focus in on the conversations that I have, and I have to look at the person and read lips. That's how I've learned to overcome sometimes how to read lips. And before, so those are just a few of the examples. One of the myths that I want to dispel is everyone used to hear the word auditory perception and immediately would go into raising the volume of their words and almost yelling at me, or at least it felt like it was yelling at me because I was always extra sensitive at hearing. And I would sit there and calmly tell them and politely tell them, I can hear you perfectly well with a normal tone of voice. So auditory does not always mean that I'm deaf. It means that it's just how the sounds get processed. So I wanted to make sure that people understood that, we're not deaf, but we just hear things a little differently. I should say we hear it normally, but we process it differently. That's the difference. So that's what I wanted to make sure everybody understood before we bring in our speaker. We are going to hear a word from one of our sponsors, and then we'll be right back after this commercial break. Meet Marie Mason from Charlottesville, Virginia. She is a podcast consultant for Liberty Virtual Solutions. She empowers transformation coaches who want to boost their business with podcasts by brainstorming the content and structure of their podcast. Our proven podcast roadmap will help you to develop a strategy for launching your podcast so that you can grow your business. Rebring your podcast to life at libertyvirtualsolutions.com. Welcome back to Choosing Acceptance Podcast with your host, Ray Mason, and today's special guest is Georgia Varjas, a book coach from Spain. I hope I got that right, Georgia.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. And she loves helping experts and thought leaders to finally write the business book to generate leads to help make an impact on others, which is absolutely phenomenal. I have gotten to be a fly on the wall and join in on several of your workshops, which always inspires me to pick up my pen or pick up my computer keyboard and work on my book. So, especially if I put it on the shelf for a while. So you are always encouraging me, and I appreciate that. So today's topic is on the 3 elements of our story: authority, tenacity, and credibility. So take it away, Georgia. Welcome to our show, and come on down the stage, so to speak.
Well, humans have been fascinated with storytelling for centuries and centuries, and everything from bedtime stories to those comic tall tales. If, you're in a room and somebody's telling a story, you're listening. And a good story is capable of quietening down a noisy room, of soothing the heart of the tormented and the restless. So a good story has to have certain elements to engage an audience. And part of that is authority, tenacity, and credibility. So let's get into those.
Yes. So authority. So what is the storytelling elements. Can you like define them first?
Okay, so, the authority side of it is not about authoritarianism or anything like that. It's about self-belief, confidence, the ability to show and share your experiences, your expertise, your knowledge, your wisdom, the adventures that you might have had in your life. And you share them in a way that people can identify with it. They don't feel so alone when they hear your story. It resonates with them. So you are confidently sharing those experiences, and your audiences are going, yeah, I believe that. I believe that could be true. That I've done something like that. So there's that connection that's really important. And then tenacity. Tenacity is about sticking it out and not quitting and really going for it full on, believing in yourself still, courage, bravery, a spoonful of courage, a spoonful of bravery, mix it all up, and you get that nice mix. So you follow it through. You tell it like it is. Because you're confident, you're telling the story, you're holding on right to the end. And credibility is making it, making the story believable, even if there's a little bit of cinematic license in it. You're making it third person, or it happened to one of my clients, that kind of story. But the credibility is contains authenticity. It's you're being natural. This is very important now. It's so much on social media. Really important to have that naturalness. And people believe you when you tell the story from your heart and you show emotion and feeling. It makes it credible, I think.
That is fantastic. I like how you simplified those in definitions and gave some great examples. I hope the way I shared my quick story about my childhood, about people misunderstanding auditory perception, and my spelling type, processing my spelling. I hope that kind of is a good example of storytelling, because I just told it very naturally. I didn't have what happened when I was growing up. And hopefully it's what I really would like for it to be is something that someone who may have auditory perception can resonate with that story, or someone who's had an experience similar to that can resonate with that story. And it's all about, it's kind of like looking at a picture, an art, like you're going to an art gallery, and it's all about how the audience views, what's their takeaway with their views on that art. It's going to look different to each person. And I think that's sort of the concept in a way. Because storytelling, you want to be able to create a really good story. So I would like for you to ask, in order to do that, how can we develop what's a good word for it? How can we really develop our storytelling? Do you have any kind of tips on how we can create more compelling or more a story that will grab the audience's attention? If you could give some ideas on how to do that.
So I think when you were talking about and explaining to us about auditory perception, you could add something that happened to you, when you were at school. So, for example, a teacher that misunderstood you, when you gave that example of OF and OV, and the way you hear things. So you might elaborate on that story a little bit more. I was only 10 years old, and my teacher picked me out in the class, and she said, "Why do you keep writing of instead of off?" You see, you would elaborate on that story to bring in the audience. They might find it funny. Humor is a great way to connect with people, and you've got a lovely sense of humor, Marie.
Oh, thank you.
So it's about thinking about just elaborating a little bit on that story to make people feel it more, see it more, understand it more. And I think that's where the confidence comes in, the authority, and not giving up too soon, you know, the tenacity, you're going for it, keep going for it. And you make it juicy, so it's credible.
That's true. So you gave us a really good example of that. Now, is there anything that you would like to add in terms of both storytelling and writing relating to, and even right now we're kind of storytelling in a sense by video because we're doing a podcast. Mm-hmm. But I was wondering, can you show us how we can become more credible through storytelling, both through writing and our writing a book or through video? Because I know you kind of do both.
Yes. So I think, you know, one of the most important things is to find the stories that you can talk about that are related to your work, to your business, because your story has to illustrate your points, your version of life, your opinions, your business. So what are those stories that fit, you know? And the other area is, what's the lesson? You're telling a really good story. So you were talking about your teacher pointing out to you what was the correct spelling.
Yes.
That there could be a lesson there that teachers need to know, that there could be children in the class with auditory perception. There could be. So teachers need to know. So you could turn that into a story. If my teacher had been trained, she would have picked me out straight away and helped me earlier. That would be the lesson to the story. Now, you wouldn't say it as blunt as that, but you could elaborate on it a little bit. You could sort of jazz it up a little bit, you know, make it more juicy. But that's just a small example of how you express yourself. So always think about, what are you trying to get across? What is the message? What impact do you want to make? What connection do you want to make? What's your point? By telling this story, what are you trying to get across? And vice versa. So if you've got a really big point that you want to let people know about, and it's a difficult one, tell a story. And practice, practice, practice. Practice,
definitely.
Practice in front of the mirror, practice with your friends, practice with kids. Kids love stories, don't they?
Well, it depends on the age. My son would rather be the one telling the story than listening to mine. He's 17. So, but younger children definitely love stories. So yeah, there you go. I used to go and babysit for decades, probably up until I was in my 40s or 50s, early 50s. So I would go in, and one of the things I always did, even with my son and anybody I would watch, I would tell stories, and I would start with the books. You know, I would make the characters come alive, and I would give them voices and give them personality, because sometimes listening to a story and seeing it, they're so used to seeing video and animation. So I wanted to make them, you know, do that, come alive. My father used to do that too. He used to make things come alive. And I think it's really important that when you're sharing a story, it's important to give the characters in the story what's the word I'm looking at? Personality.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you, how do you give your characters in the story a personality?
In the written form?
In the written and in the spoken form. Either one perspective you want to share.
Well, I think in the written form, it's probably a little bit easier because you can use, you know, descriptive words to build them up. But you have to put yourself in their shoes in a way. You have to sort of think, well, what would that person really be like? What would they wear? What would be their attitude to this and this subject, for example? So if you were talking about your teacher, what was that person like? Did they wear glasses? Were they very strict? Were they very stiff? Did they have a good sense of humor? And you can bring these into your story. So you would say, my teacher loved me because she had a good sense of humor, for example. So, you know, already the audience is hearing or reading, this one has a personality, so you do it like that, I think. Or if you said, my teacher just did not understand me, couldn't get it at all. She was very stiff. She always wore grey, you know, that kind of thing, which fitted in with the personality. She always had her hair tied back and it looked so pretty, but she would never let it down. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I actually had a 5th grade teacher, and I think that my friends and I found out she wore a wig by accident one day. And yeah, I don't know how. I can't remember all the details behind that one, but it was just one of those, when you mentioned that, I'm like, oh yeah. And the teacher wore a wig or something would have been a great introduction. They'll be like, let me find out, you know. So, but that's a good point. And then being able to really what I want to also highlight is for people in our community, we always talk about turning your talents into career. So we want them to be able to paint a story that's going to help them share their messages, whether it's in written form or video. So can you give us some quick tips on how to share their journey?
So I think one of the basic things is be curious. Be really, really curious about everything. You want to know, you know, what that person was like, what they wore, what they said, listen in, you know. I think the other thing is that it is about lining up your story with your business, if you like. So if you're a coach and you are a life coach, or you might be a health coach, you know, you might start, if you're a health coach, for example, you might start off and say, this morning I had fresh grapefruit and cinnamon porridge, or whatever it is that you like. And you know, you express it in a way that people taste it. They, ooh, or oh, whichever one it is. So you put your personality into it. And the people go, oh, cinnamon porridge, or I love that, that's a good idea. So you're connecting. So it's finding a way to connect tiny little stories, and then you get bigger stories. And you have to find stories that you can talk about easily, and find ways that will illustrate and is connected to your business, to what it is that you've got, your product, your service. I think those are the main things. Be curious.
That's awesome. I love it. And then as far as sharing an outcome, I think every story should have like an clear ending, a clear outcome of what there is, because you mentioned that a little bit, and I wanted to expand on that. So if you could just show us how to create an outcome that would be like a positive outcome, share like a positive outcome, an example of one.
Okay, so a positive outcome is something that brings a reward or a result, something that gives you satisfaction. So you might, going back to the porridge, going back to edibles, because everybody likes something to eat, don't they? Yes. And so if you're a health coach, for example, or a sports coach, or, you know, anything like that, or in our case where, you know, we encourage people to write, don't we? So it is about finding that full stop at the end, if you like. What is it that, so the story has to bring you in, fill you up, and then it leads out. So it has that kind of shape, as you described it in the painting, you know, it gives you that satisfaction. So what was the result of it? So if I keep talking about all this food, cinnamon porridge or whatever it is, or the lovely fruit tray or whatever it is you fancy.
I'm thinking of brownies myself. But anyway.
Brownies, there you go. You know, what is it? You know, the coach would need to say, well, this will make you feel so much better and it will fill you up until lunchtime. So it's a very good breakfast to have. That will be the end of that. So if it's a sports or a health coach that's talking about physical activity, then it would be, you know, if you do 25 press-ups, if you do 25 press-ups, you're going to feel so energized and you're going to feel so good afterwards. That's the result. In our case, in the writing case, for example, or speaking, it's telling that good story and seeing that connection with the audience. So the comments that might come, if you're doing a live video, people are responding to it. Even on a replay, they're responding to it. They say, oh, that's a really good tip. I like that. Thank you for that. Or in the written word, they write a good review for your book. So all these are little results. And one of the best, of course, is the testimonial.
That's awesome. No, I love that. And the reason why is because when we're sharing our stories about our journey in life, we want to start turning our talents into career. Then we're going to have to share that, make that connection from our life journey into our business. And we want to be able to know how to make those connections with our audience that resonates with them. That's why I wanted you to share with that, so that, you're going to want to make those stories showcase what it is you want as an outcome. Yeah. So for them as well. So they have a great clear picture of how to work with you, and also just to connect with you. For example, I shared this story on Facebook at the beginning of the week, and I shared about my journey of my struggle victory story with my business, and how I, after 5 years, decided in December to close down a podcast agency because it just wasn't being fruitful and wasn't the best use of my time. So I can focus more on building my business academy and my book, because that was in the Grow the Podcast, and that's sort of where I want to keep my focus this year. And I quietly behind the scenes always doing something. So I don't always just blast out what I'm doing. Some people brag about it. I don't. I just quietly behind the scenes get things done, as you probably observed the last couple of years I've known you. And then I share my results, because share that that I'm getting ready to launch or whatever. And then I'm ready to talk about it, because during the journey, I want to make sure that I have everything where I need it to be, so that when I'm ready to launch it, I can share it more effectively. So when I shared this story, I had a friend from high school that I hadn't talked to in 13 years. I mean, we chatted on Facebook, don't get me wrong, but it just, not on a call. So we got on a Zoom call the other day, because she's like, I'm impressed. I'm like, I didn't know you did that. And he's like, it resonated with her. So we got on a call, we reconnected, and hopefully it'll lead to something. But if not, we're still friends. It's not going to stop me from being friends with her. She was one of my big sisters, I think, in high school, at least. So it was really nice to reconnect with somebody. So you just never know when you share a real story about your journey, how it's going to resonate with that person. And that's just my example of how it resonated with somebody. And it resonated with more than one, but that was the one I'm excited about, because at some point I might get to work with her and help her build a business of her dreams. So that's sort of what I wanted to share with you as an example. So I am super excited about having you here. I'm so grateful you came today. Do you have one last parting words? And then we want to share your valuable resource that you might have for an audience. So any more tips?
Well, I think one of the most fascinating things about writing a book is that you never know who you will become while you're writing and after you're writing, because the impact on you personally and professionally is enormous. So be ready for big, big, wonderful things.
I love it. I always tell people, dream big, because you just dream big, because, oh my gosh, you'd be surprised at what opportunities fall in your lap when you dream big and you go for your dreams. So there you go. I mean, opportunities like meeting Georgia Varjas was a great gift. So today's valuable resources, is there something you wanted to share with our audience today?
Well, every month I do a writing masterclass, and it's a great introduction for people who want to learn more, find out, bust their myths about writing. And I always invite published authors like yourself, Marie.
It was great fun, by the way. Thank you.
And emerging authors and publishers as well come along, so that there's a good mix of ideas and perceptions and information. And we get down to some good chats as well. So I do that monthly, and you can find out about the next one, which will be late March, and it'll go up on my website very soon.
Excellent. And when you have that ready, let me know, and we'll be happy to share the link. We will be sharing this probably the first week of March, so that would be a good timing for you. So excellent. Thank you. I just want to say thank you so much for being a part of our show today and sharing some great valuable information about the 3 elements of our story, which is authority, tenacity, and credibility on the Choosing Acceptance podcast. Please join us next week for some great tips on how to overcome your learning disabilities and achieve success. So we stream weekly on our YouTube channel and Facebook groups where you can contact and collect us or collect all of our offers. And I will make sure I post links on both platforms. And please make sure you like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel so that we can share, so we can make a bigger impact with our messages. It's all about bringing awareness to our community and making a bigger impact. So thanks for watching, and goodbye until next time. And here's a word from one of our sponsors. Have a great week, everyone. And that ends this show. So thanks, Georgia.
Thank you, Marie.
Bye, everyone. My name is Marie Mason. I am the author of Bubble Bear Special Problem. And this book destigmatizes learning disabilities in order to provide a better understanding of their learning process. It helps children to overcome their fear of learning disabilities so that they can contribute their talents by bringing awareness to how children should be treated in and out of the classroom. If you would like more to learn about this book, then go to Amazon.com and check out Bubble Bear Special Problem by Marie Mason.